Welcome to round 3 of the WMSC 3 World Tour. Today, we are headed for one of Europe's most famous racing venues, the Norisring Street Circuit in Nuremberg, Germany. But before we show you the highlights of this exhilarating event, let's take a quick look at the WMSC 3 news. Yours truly is going to have his home race at the Norisring, but currently it doesn't look as if Core nor his teammate Adrian Friedrich are in a particularly competitive position. Instead, the Costech boys look quite feisty after Turri has won the first 2 races. Seeing as Turri is not a big fan of the street circuit, this might be Feckeler's, Heyman's, or Benton-Reeder's time to pounce. Though with Aaron Smith returning to the RSL for Lightning, things might get a bit more difficult for both Turri and Costech. Of course, we talked to Smith ahead of the race. Where do you think performance-wise you're at right now ahead of the Norisring race?
I think in terms of specifically on Automobilista, I still think there's a little bit of practice to do because I've not really got on well with the Formula 3 car on Automobilista. It's literally the complete opposite to what it is like on iRacing, which I'm literally fighting for a championship for at the moment. So yeah, it's very different, especially compared to the kart car, which in my opinion was amazing to drive.
And how would he fare against his competition, considering that Norisring might be one of the most difficult circuits on the calendar?
Well, I mean, especially since I have zero experience with Norisring, ever. Never driven the track in my life, apart from the practice I've done this week. I know it's used in it's pretty bad, but compared to, they usually use it in like DTM and stuff, and we're in little dinky F3 cars, which is going to be chaos as hell. But I'd argue this is probably the most difficult on the calendar. I think everyone knows Adelaide, to be honest, compared to Norisring, so I think it's going to be absolute chaos this weekend.
With that out of the way, let's have another look at round 2 of the championship and talk to some of the folks involved in the most interesting storylines coming out of the race.
I'll be raised, that's Benton-Reeder!
Also ich nehme eigentlich die WMS 3 mehr als Vorbereitung für nächstes Jahr auf die WMSC, auf die Hauptliga. Und natürlich versucht man halt dann auch so gut wie möglich da reinzukommen, damit man den Schwung mitnimmt. Das ist jetzt so eine gute Frage. Ich meine, Max muss ich sagen, er war schneller im Training wie ich auf jeden Fall. Ich hatte also die erste Runde war ganz gut, dann habe ich mich da letzte Kurve mal verbremst. Ja, ich meine, ich hätte die Chance gehabt zu gewinnen und es war halt doch schon ärgerlich, dass ich mich da mit so einer Leichtigkeitsfehler rausgedreht habe und mir so die Chancen eigentlich genommen habe, weil ich halt einfach mal kurz nicht konzentriert war und dann ging es eigentlich bloß noch darum, Schadensbegrenzung zu machen und so viele Punkte wie möglich zu holen, dass man eventuell vielleicht doch noch eine Chance auf den Titel hat, was aber schwer wird gegen Lorenzo.
Ja, ich war auf dem Weg zurück nach Hause. Ich wollte eigentlich noch mit dem Training starten. Ich habe bei einem neuen Vermieter eine Wohnung unterschrieben. Und auf dem Rückweg, bin ich halt auf nasser Straße, leider Gottes mit dem Roller oder Moped, wie man es auch immer nennen möchte, habe ich hingelegt. Vor mir ein Auto hat plötzlich gebremst. Da war eine große Verwerfung in der Straße. Ich war mit dem Vorderrad in der Luft, habe die Vorderbremse zu fest gedrückt und ja, dann gab das eine das andere. und ich bin halt hingeflogen, 50 oder 100 Meter über die Straße gerutscht, im Endeffekt auf allen Vieren und habe mega viel Glück gehabt, dass die Leute hinter mir nicht über mich drüber gefahren sind oder ich noch unter das Auto vor mir rutsche und ja, deswegen musste ich halt mit dem RTW abgeholt werden. Man war sich nicht sicher, wie lange die ganzen Vorsorgeuntersuchungen im Krankenhaus dauern. Die Polizei hat mich dann auch noch zu dem Vorfall befragt und deswegen war es unklar, ob ich es zum Rennen zurückschaffe zeitlich, aber auch gesundheitlich, weil am Anfang halt noch gar nicht klar war, ob ich irgendwelche inneren Verletzungen oder so davongetragen habe. Und ja, hab's dann doch noch kurzfristig 2 Minuten vor dem Rennen in die Lobby geschafft und da war dann für mich klar, ich kann antreten. Ja, gestern stand ich noch ein bisschen neben mir, muss man ganz ehrlich sagen. Aber heute ist soweit alles okay. Ich habe eine Schulterprellung davon gezogen, ein bisschen was, ein paar blaue Flecke am Oberschenkel, aber das war's dann auch.
Honestly, I just wanted to finish in the points, so seeing at the end I somehow ended on the podium, seemingly, I think that's an absolute achievement for me. Like, I wasn't expecting that at all. Honestly, I would consider myself to be around about in the midfield. It's just that my pace is not as fast as the front runners, if you get what I mean. So, like, it's just that I was expecting to be if I had to pick a position as to where I thought I would have ran around for the race, I would have said like P7, honestly. Honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to the next race at the Norisring. I think that would be pretty entertaining for my points, and I think I'm pretty good at that track. On the opposite end, I'm not quite looking forward to Suzuka Short, as I'm not quite acquainted to that track as, let's say, Buenos Aires or Norisring as well. So I'd say that's how I look at the calendar. As for Johannesburg and Adelaide, I don't really mind them because I do have some experience with that track, albeit in different cars in the simulator. So that's what I had to say about the calendar.
Well, I guess you would have heard Aaron Smith's concern considering the Norisring, and you might be wondering, why are we looking at his onboard? Well, Smith actually managed to get pole position at the Norisring. That's right, Aaron Smith, the guy who's most likely only going to run one race this entire World Tour, is on pole position. 1 extra point for him, no extra point for Benton Reeder Heyman or Lorenzo Turri. Second big chicane after the hairpin. Difficult to judge where to turn in properly. You could lose loads of time. You could also crash your car, in theory, up to 4th gear, 5th gear. Up to the next hairpin, 6th gear. Brake right when the car is about as straight as it can be. Try your best not to hit the barrier there. And again, it doesn't look like a particularly difficult circuit, but trust me when I tell you it is, especially in a racing situation. And congratulations to Aaron Smith for pole position. Well, let's have a look at the starting grid for the Norisring race. First of all, apologies if I sound a bit awkward today. I am in a new living situation, and therefore I'm not particularly sure whether I'm in a position to actually scream and be overly emotional as I would be usually, so apologies if this sounds a bit awkward and different to what you're usually used to. Aaron Smith with a brilliant pole position ahead of Max Heyman, only 5 thousandths of a second between the two. Josh Flynn in a great third place, Lorenzo Turri in 4th, Gabriel Peckley in 5th, Daniel Benton-Reeder in 6th position, Philip Feckler in 7th, Roy Seifert in 8th, Bartosz Kapeta in 9th, and Dominik Kronsky rounding out the top 10. Certainly not what we expected pace-wise from Daniel Benton-Reeder here at the Norisring. Thomas Crabb in 11th, Hugh Hamill in 12th, Mark Wittmann in 13th, again Simon Kors struggling with this circuit in 14th, Pedro de Souza with a solid debut in 15th, Adam Rosinko in 16th, ahead of Lucas Hamilton, Adrian Friedrich. Matthew Boyski and Aaron Curtis start right at the back of the field. Now, neither one of them were in a position to actually qualify for the race due to technical difficulties, which is why both of them had to start at the back of the grid. Though we expect Aaron Curtis to follow their way through the field, I'm not so sure about that being the case for Matthew Oboyski. Now we're looking at Aaron Smith, and this is definitely exciting to see him on track. This might be the only time this season where he'll actually be able to race in the WMSC 3 World Tour, and therefore he might have a negative impact on the championship in the eyes of some, especially the Costech boys, seeing as they have to catch up on Lorenzo Turri. But again, remember, he's not particularly fond of the circuit, so we'll wait and see whether he can make the best out of it or whether it's going to be his worst performance so far. Heyman in second, Josh Flynn in third. Definitely interested to see how well Flynn is going to perform. And we can see Turri there in fourth place, who qualified ahead of Dania Bentenrieder, which is definitely going to be important to see. We can see Curtis in the back, and we're going to see the 4 red lights, I think it's going to be this time round, in just a second on this incredibly famous circuit. We can see 1 light, 2 lights, 3 lights. And we're off. And it's a good start from both Aaron Smith and Max Heyman. Flynn still in third, Turri still in fourth. Bentenrieder apparently now ahead of Gabriel Peckley in fifth place. Everybody following through to the first hairpin. Bentenrieder on the outside of Flynn. Everybody trying to file through. Apologies for the summer up bad frame rate, and there is a crash already, it seems, with Dominik Kronski. But everybody's still in the race. We can see Smith, Heyman, Bentenrieder, Turri fighting with Flynn for fourth place. Bentenrieder with a great start already in third position. 2 of the Costech boys now in podium positions, but Aaron Smith stays in first place. Now everybody following through the second hairpin. Look at Turri and Peckley fighting. Down the main straight, we can see 2 Streamline boys, a back row car, and Simon Core. And Aaron Smith still in the lead of the race. Remember, 1 point already for him, taking pole position, as we can see in the background, Peckley fighting with Lorenzo Turri. Down the straight, into the hairpin, Turri fighting with Feckler as well. Great start for Feckler, it seems, as Heyman's trying to go around the outside of Aaron Smith. Into that tight chicane. Again, it doesn't really look like a particularly complex circuit, but it is quite dangerous, as we can see. Philip Feckler spinning in the top left corner of your screen. We'll have a look at that in just a second in the replay, but Heyman trying to go around the outside of Smith doesn't work. Bentenrieder might have a look at Heyman at this point, it seems, but not yet. Heyman's still in the rear view mirror of Aaron Smith. Again, remember, Smith not in the championship fight. Solely Heyman and Bentenrieder are in the championship fight, and Heyman's ahead of Aaron Smith now. Max Heyman in the lead of the race. Great maneuver by Max Heyman. He gets bumped into. Collision between Aaron Smith and Max Heyman. I presume that Smith is going to receive a time penalty for this. Dania Bentenrieder now in second. Curtis almost bumping into Max Heyman as well, and that is going to be a big disappointment for Max Heyman in the championship, seeing as he now has to crawl back into that position. Bentenrieder now in second, Flynn now in third, Peckley now in fourth, Turri, Seifert, Wittmann, Crab in the points positions, Scarpetta now in ninth. He would only get the breadcrumbs, Hamill rounding out the top 10. And we're going to have a look at the replay in just a second. But first, let's look at the great start from Dania Bentenrieder, already ahead of Peckley after a few seconds. Trying to go around the outside, it seems, of Lorenzo Turri. Does so successfully as well as Josh Flynn. Anticipated that brilliantly. Bentenrieder now in third place, now in second place. As we have a look at what happened with Dominik Kronski. Now, I'm not sure whether he was bumped into or whether he just, pushed the throttle a bit too early. Definitely disappointing for the man, reminiscent of an early 2000s Grand Prix racing team. And yep, that was seemingly all on Dominik Kronski, at least from this perspective. But let's look at what happened with Philip Feckler fighting with Roy Seifert, it seems. Yep, gets a bump, and it seems like Roy Seifert is going to receive a time penalty for this. And from what we can tell, that is definitely a deserved penalty. Yep, gets bumped into with Mark Wittmann bumping into Seifert as well, but it seems like there is a penalty for Roy Seifert. And as we can see here, the replay with Smith and Heyman, and that definitely needs to be a penalty for Aaron Smith, almost blatantly just bumping into the back of him, almost as if in his perception, Heyman wasn't there. And that needs to be a penalty in my humble opinion. Now, Bent Reader in second. That's great for his championship, actually, if he can get ahead of Aaron Smith, and it looks like he might be in a position to do so. Bent Reader around the outside, and he's actually ahead for a second, and he's in the lead. Brilliant maneuver by Daniel Bent Reader. Possibly the greatest maneuver we've seen so far from Bent Reader this season. But Smith, of course, trying to counter. He's an ambitious young sim racer, of course, wanting that W. Chasing that W, I might say. And he's still in a position to do that if he doesn't get a time penalty. But it is confirmed now that Aaron Smith has received a time penalty. Now, there are two options. Either he stays out and it's going to get added to his race time, or he's going to serve it in the pit lane. We're going to wait and see what Aaron Smith does. Meanwhile, Core and Hamil fighting for 10th place. Remember, only points for the top 8 finishers. Behind them, Pedro de Souza, as well as another back row car. I presume that's Lucas Hamilton. Again, Core not particularly quick around his home circuit, but he might still grab some points if he continues like this. Doesn't look like he's particularly comfortable with his car right now. Neither does Adrian Friedrich, who's already way back. As we can see, cars already locking their brakes ahead of Core. As Pedro de Souza slightly outbrakes him, though it's still a solid debut from him so far in the WMSC 3 World Tour. Remember, this series is partially built to give people an opportunity to present themselves for the WMSC, the Grand Prix Racing Series, starting in 2023. On factor 2, and that's Aaron Smith going off. Aaron Smith losing his front and rear wing, and now I can guarantee you that he's going to serve his time penalty in the pits because he needs to pit at this point. 25 minutes to go in this race. Now, he was somewhat erratic in the American Monoposto Championship, but I didn't expect him to put it in the wall this early. Let's have a look at the replay. And that can happen quite easily because you need to get the car in as early as possible to take that chicane with the optimum line, with the racing line there. Looking at the slow motion, that is bitterly disappointing for Aaron Smith. Now he needs to hope that there is a safety car later on in this race. Otherwise, this might spell the end to his hopes for a victory at the Norisring. Bent Reader now in the lead ahead of Flynn in second. Peckley in a fantastic third. Turri in a solid fourth. Seifert in a brilliant fifth ahead of Wittmann, Crab, and Corpetta. 3 streamlined cars in 6th, 7th, and 8th place. Hamil in 9th. Core in 10th, still chasing a points position. As Lucas Hamilton is fighting with Pedro de Souza there, the back row car versus the Team RSL car. Again, Team RSL, the guest driver program, they're not counted towards the team's championship, but I can already tell you we'll see more guest drivers throughout the season as we see a fight for 13th between Dominic Kronsky and Aaron Curtis. Curtis already up to 13th. Solid performance so far from the Turismo Autosport driver, fighting with Dominic Kronsky, who's now on the inside of Curtis, and is now ahead of Aaron Curtis in 13th position. Curtis now in 14th. Behind them, Max Heyman, Ruzinko, and Philip Feckler. Quick drivers all around as we see Aaron Smith out of the pits now. Remember, Curtis finishing 3rd last time out, and Kronsky slightly outbrakes himself and collides with Max Heyman. Second collision of the day for Heyman. There was nothing he could do about that for sure. 360 for Kronsky. He continues, but he'll be absolutely frustrated with himself, absolutely annoyed about his performance today. I can guarantee you. I know him quite well, and he will not be happy with his performance today. After 9 laps, Bent Reader, Flynn, Packley, Turri, the top 4 drivers. Seifert in 5th, Wittmann, Crab, Corpetta, still the 3 streamlined boys in the top 8. As we can see, I presume that's Adrian Friedrich with a somewhat broken car at this point. Hamil in 9th still for back row. Core still in 10th ahead of de Souza and Hamilton, the top 12 cars. And I think that Aaron Curtis might still get some points today looking at their performance so far, as well as Max Heyman, who's already up there again. as we see this lovely shot of one of the most famous street circuits in the world, if we're being completely honest, more known for touring car racing, as we see Peckley and Turri fight for third place, as Turri slightly bumps Peckley there, but Peckley's still ahead. The man racing for Bravo Snowshutting Esports. One of the quickest drivers in the field, I'd say, but then again, he's been somewhat inconsistent both in the American Monoposto Championship and in the WMSC 3 World Tour, but I guarantee you he is definitely somebody to watch out for, not only in the WMSC 3 World Tour, but also for some of the Grand Prix teams who are going to race next year in the World Monoposto Sim Racing Championship, and we're going to tell you more about that championship at the end of this year and the beginning of next year, as we're going to look at a replay in just a second. And that is Mark Wittmann making a mistake. Thomas Crab able to avoid him, as well as Bartosz Kerpeta. So at least one of the streamlined cars dropping out of the points now, as Lucas Hamilton follows through, as well as Max Heyman. Wittmann being a fair sportsman, waiting for everyone to be able to pass, seeing as it would be unsafe for him to What is he doing? What is he doing? He's going backwards. He's going backwards. He's doing a 360. I've never seen anything like this in sim racing. And we're going to have a look at that one more time. That is one of the most bizarre things I've possibly ever seen. Not only in the ORSL, not only in the WMSC 3, but sim racing, online sim racing, league racing, period, from Mark Wittmann. Again, he's dropped out of the points, and look at that! Look at that! Maybe wanting to flex a bit with his drifting skills. It is not a drift championship, my man. But if I were in a position to do so, I would have awarded him with a few extra points for that. Absolutely lovely, though slightly bizarre, you could argue. Now, two of the Streamline boys still in the points with Kerpeta and Crab, but we can see Kerpeta spins, almost hits Hugh Hummel, who's now in the points, which would be brilliant for back row. Kerpeta also waiting for people to follow through. Fair sportsmanship once again from one of these Streamline drivers, but definitely disappointing, seeing as it's now only one driver left in the points for Streamline. That, of course, being Thomas Crab. With 20 minutes to go, Peckley still fighting with Turri for P3. Josh Flynn ahead of them in a solid second place, but between the two, and Turri's now ahead of Peckley, but I presume that the race director, Alexander Knezovic, the American Monoposto champion, as well as Michael Kozbel, might want to have a look at that as Peckley bumps into the back of Lorenzo Turri there.
Lorenzo Turri give the position back to Peckley. That was not a clean move.
And I was right in assuming that Knezovic would have a look at that. He told Turri, give the position back. That was not a clean move. That was more bumper cars than open wheel racing. And I can't help but agree to an extent. Peckley once again in third out of Turri, Seifert, Crab. Hamil now in seventh. Core now in eighth, because two of the Streamline cars are no longer in the points. Heyman is already up to 10th place. Again, important for his championship to stay in points contention, as we see Roy Seifert now behind Lorenzo Turri in 5th place. Great performances so far this year, or this season, excuse me, from Roy Seifert, the junior driver for Back Row Motorsports with the number 23, the German now. But remember, Turri's not really a fan of the circuit, so it's essentially damage control for him at this point. And it could be quite the solid damage control, it looks like. Lap 15. Heyman overtaking De Sousa, therefore Heyman now in 9th. Look at the chaos, because remember, Aaron Smith has lost a lap. He's trying to unlap himself with Feckler behind, Hamilton in 12th, which is already creating quite a chaotic situation, because there will be loads of traffic jams today because of that. There would be either way, considering there are quite a few pace discrepancies between the drivers. Look at De Sousa and Smith in the background. Look at Heyman now braking. Corey has to brake quite early for the final turn, it seems, and therefore Max Heyman now back in points contention. Not just in contention, he's back in the points. He is in 8th, but Turri, remember, is still in 4th place, and he needs to find a way to get ahead of Turri if possible before the 30 minutes run out. Lap 16, Thomas Crab with a spin. Slight lapse of concentration possibly, but Thomas Crab has stated in his stream that he felt that the grip compared to the warm-up session wasn't really there for him to be able to extract the maximum out of his car. Of course, we've linked to Thomas Crab's stream in the description below, as well as to Matthew Oboyski, who streamed this race as well. I also think Lucas Hamilton has streamed the race. All streams of the drivers are linked below. As we see Philip Fekler fighting with Pedro de Sousa. Fekler now in 9th. Of course, he dropped back after that collision with Roy Seifert. Remember, he receives a time penalty. But Philip Fekler still in points contention, it seems. Core ahead of him in 8th, with Aaron Smith trying to unlap himself, bumping into the back of Core. And that might lose Core his 8th place, it seems. Now Core and Fekler, who already fought both at the first and second races of the season. Fekler with no slipstream, but definitely more traction out of the final turn. Outbreaking Core into the hairpin. Core attempting the switchback, doesn't quite work. Better traction for Fekler. Fekler is now in 8th, and that will definitely piss off Core, I can assure you. But no penalty for Aaron Smith, at least in this situation. But remember, he received a time penalty, which he served at his pit stop, at his necessary pit stop after colliding with the barrier there. And we can tell you, Benton Reader Flynn still in the first 2 positions. Turri still in 4th behind Gabriel Peckley. As we see Hugh Hummel in a great position right now, though he's going to lose one of them to Heyman, but still, Hugh Hummel in a great 7th place so far. It would be his first points of the season, so even with that mistake, it would be his best result so far in the WMSC 3 World Tour. Meanwhile, a bit of a gap between Lorenzo Turri and Gabriel Peckley, but he throws it away. Collision between the two. Turri says thank you very much. He's now in 3rd place, and look at Seifert right behind him. Yeah, sure, he has a time penalty, but still, under the right circumstances, that could spell a great result, or that could be a great result for him. Excuse me, English is not my first language. Depending on whether Peckley makes more mistakes today. But Turri now in an important 3rd place, especially considering where Heyman is at the moment. But Daniel Benton-Reader still leading the race, and it looks as if he might also be headed for the fastest lap of the race as well. Remember, there are points for fastest lap and pole position as well. While Matthew Oboyski is letting people through. Not the greatest performance so far for Matthew Oboyski. Doesn't seem to be on pace, and he collides with Aaron Smith. What in the world is going on with Smith and other drivers today? I'm not particularly sure. Now 10 minutes to go. Flynn still in 2nd. Great performance so far from Flynn. Now we've asked him whether he'd be up for an interview. He declined, but just for people to be aware that there will be no interview with Josh Flynn if he finishes in 2nd place. Of course, we respected his wish, but we just wanted to point out that it's been a great performance so far from him today, as well as last time out in Buenos Aires, where of course his race was ruined by Adrian Friedrich. As we have a look at the replay of Bartosz Krapeta making a mistake. Definitely disappointing, but to be completely honest with you, not particularly surprising to see that from the Streamline Engineering driver. If only he was in a position to find more consistency, because still, the pace is there with Bartosz Krapeta without a shadow of a doubt, but the consistency just isn't at this point. He has to go into the pits. His car's slightly smoking, actually. Definitely disappointing for Streamline today, seeing as they were in a position to get 3 cars into the points today. Now, the fight for 7th. Fekler and Hamill now, seeing as Hamill dropped back a bit pace-wise. Fekler in 8th. And look at that traffic jam that we see with cars being lapped, so on and so forth. And Curtis colliding with Wittmann. Wittmann spins once again, though this time it's not his fault. He might have outbraked himself a bit, but still, that is Curtis' fault, I presume, and we can already tell you there will be a time penalty for Aaron Curtis as well. Definitely disappointing, seeing as they had the pace today, possibly, but maybe not the consistency. Turri now in third, Peckley, Seifert still in fifth, but remember, time penalty for him. Heyman in sixth, Hamill in seventh. Core now in eighth place. D'Souza and Feckler in 10th, and you might be wondering, wait a minute, why is Philip Feckler in 10th? Well, we're about to show you in just a second. Because he was trying to overtake Hugh Hamill right here, maybe a bit overambitious from Feckler. And therefore he is now dropped back to 10th. Now, the homeboy Simon Core therefore is now back into the points, as well as Hugh Hamill, who's now in second. Not a homeboy here, but definitely... It would definitely be great to see him finish in the points for once. Now, Benton Reader still in the lead ahead of Flynn, and there's not a lot between the two, but I wonder whether Flynn has enough pace as we see Matthew Boyski spinning and Hamilton going wide a bit. I wonder whether Flynn has the pace to actually overtake Daniel Benton Reader and take his first win from him, though it would be incredibly important for Daniel Benton Reader to win this race. His first race of the season. Now, I wonder how aggressive he would be in defending against Josh Flynn, because as I said, Daniel Benton Reader has been somewhat inconsistent, as we saw in Buenos Aires, where he could have definitely won the race pace-wise, but he didn't manage to get the W. But today might be the day for Daniel Benton Reader to get his first race in the WMSC, to get his first race in the ORSL, period. But as we see, there's loads of traffic behind, still quite a few laps to go in this race, and as we can see, Flynn, I think he knows that he might be in a position to win this race, though I'm not particularly sure whether he's going to risk a second place with a dive bomb to get into first place, as we see a collision between Peckley and Turri. But both are able to continue. Sportsmanship from Peckley there, waiting for Turri to get through once again, which is why I think he's not going to receive a penalty. Both of them able to continue. But that was definitely spicy there. Turri and Peckley still fighting for third place. Great duel so far from both of them. Again, remember, Turri is not particularly fond of this circuit, so a great or a fourth place either way would be brilliant for his championship, seeing as he might have expected a bit less, as we see Lucas Hamilton spinning there. He'll lose loads of time with that. Now, no overambitious move, please, from Gabriel Peckley as he bumps into Turri's back once again. Both of them still able to continue, but I presume that is going to be a time penalty for Gabriel Peckley. That was a bit too much, my man. And we can confirm that Gabriel Peckley has received a 5-second time penalty, and that might just cost him a podium today. Though it's going to make the duel with Roy Seifert more interesting, because now both are on the same penalty. And we're seeing a replay with yours truly because, well, let's just call this a sudden loss of talent and move on. Though I do like looking at that 360 Feckler going through, as well as Pedro D'Souza. And Pedro D'Souza is actually in a position where he might finish in the points on debut, which would be a great result for the man with the number 100. Again, the guest driver program conceptualized for people who might not be in a position to attend all or most of the WMSC 3 World Tour races, but would still like to get a taste of these cars, the circuits, and the ORSL in general. D'Souza joined on that basis, and so far he's actually done quite well for himself, and we can already tell you that he's going to be at the next race at Johannesburg as well. And with 7 minutes to go, we see D'Souza spinning at the final turn, which is most likely going to cost him a chance at a points finish, but still a solid debut so far from D'Souza, which means that Feckler is now in 8th, Core is now in 9th. As we see Flynn and Benton Reader fighting for victory. You might have noticed that Flynn is lagging a bit, so I'm not particularly sure whether that's going to influence their duel from Benton Reader's perspective, that where maybe Benton Reader is talking to his teammate Heyman, possibly calming him down to not fight Flynn too hard, knowing that Flynn's lagging a bit and that they might risk a collision and therefore even a retirement. Though on the other hand, I'm not particularly sure how much Flynn is willing to risk in this instance. As we can also see the car smoking a bit, possibly going with a low radiator setting today. So let's hope that we don't see any potential engine failures. We've seen quite a few in the American Monoposto Championship, where people gambled on low radiators, as we see Turri once again against Lorenzo Turri. Turri against Peckley, excuse me, and Turri now. I'm not sure if he's aware of the time penalty served. But either way, he's through. He's now in third already. But remember, Peckley is getting a 5-second time penalty. But either way, Turri now through. Well, he isn't. Peckley through once again, but remember, time penalty for Gabriel Peckley. Behind him, time penalty for Roy Seifert as well. But look at that cost tag in the background. That, of course, is Max Heyman, already getting closer and closer to our championship leader, Lorenzo Turri, as we see Pedro de Souza in the wall. Now, that is bitterly disappointing. Bumping into the wall once again. Let's hope he can get out of it. Again, it's been a solid debut so far from De Souza, so quite disappointing to see that mistake. 3 minutes to go as Gabriel Peckley makes the same mistake. Now, does that mean he doesn't get out of it? He can't get out of it. He's stuck. Gabriel Peckley is stuck, and he's gonna have. It looks like he's gonna have to retire at this point. Wow, this is absolutely unbelievable. Gabriel Peckley has to retire, which means that Feckler is now going to be in 7th. Core is now going to be in 8th, it seems. As Roy Seifert and Max Heyman are officially fighting for 5th, but remember, Seifert has a time penalty, so Heyman is definitely going to be in 5th place now. And that has been an absolutely excellent recovery drive so far from Max Heyman. Again, the cards he's been dealt today weren't particularly great, but he made the best out of it. Turri ahead of him in 4th. He's going to be in 3rd place. Flynn now once again lagging a bit. Corpetta behind him, who's already been lapped. No, he's not into the wall, actually. He's still good. He's still good, everybody. And it looks like Daniel Bentenreiter might actually be on to win his first race in the WMSC 3 World Tour if he can keep it clean, if he can keep it out of the wall. As we see him lapping Thomas Crabb in the streamline. It's the final lap of the race, and Daniel Bentenreiter finally able to put it all together, finally able to get the victory. He wins the 3rd round of the championship at the Norisring with a fantastic performance and the fastest lap of the race to boast as well. So I'm aware that this race must have been at least a tad bit confusing, so let's have a recap of the results. Of course, Bentenreiter, Flynn in P1 and P2. Turri with a fantastic 3rd place. He really doesn't enjoy the circuit, so he did more than well on track today. Heyman, incredible recovery drive in 4th place. Roy Seifert, remember, 5-second penalty in 5th, but he managed to stay ahead of Philip Feckler, who finished in 6th place. Also, brilliant recovery drive from him. Core, all of a sudden, in 7th place because of the Peckley retirement. Thomas Crabb, at least 1 solitary point for Streamline Engineering in 8th place. Dominic Kronsky with a 10-second time penalty in 9th. He received that for an unsafe re-entry to the track. Bartosz Krpeta in 10th. Mark Wittmann in 11th. Adam Ruzinko in 12th. Aaron Smith manages to finish in 13th. Hamilton in 14th. De Souza in 15th, as well as Peckley in 16th. Followed by Oboyski, Hamill, Curtis, and Adrian Friedrich. Well, other than hoping that my neighbors don't hate me now, let's have a quick look at the driver's standings after 3 races of the WMSC 3 World Tour. Lorenzo Turri is still in the lead of the championship ahead of Daniel Bentenreiter with a 7-point cushion. Heyman in 3rd, 5 points behind his teammate. Peckley in 4th with 13 points. Flynn now in the top 5 ahead of Feckler and Simon Core, all with 8 points. Curtis in 8th, Seifert in 9th, Thomas Crabb in 10th ahead of Aaron Smith, Mark Wittmann, and Victor Guzman. Actually, Aaron Smith got the fastest lap time instead of Bentenreiter, excuse me. So 2 points for Aaron Smith despite finishing outside of the top 8. In the team's championship, Kostak is now leading with a dominant 39 points out of Mistral, a 1-car operation, in 2nd. Bravo Snowshot and Esports in 3rd out of SCMM and C2F Racing, Turismo Autosport, Back Row Streamline, Lightning Engineering, and AC Racing Esports. Let's see how the championship continues next time out when the WMSC 3 World Tour is headed for a retro Retro Classic, the 1976 layout of the Johannesburg circuit. Until then, thank you for watching. If you're curious about the ORSL or iBoss, check the Discord link below. And until then, keep racing. See you at Johannesburg.